Toby and I were best friends. We grew up in Mushin and we were always inseparable. His fight was my fight, his pain, my pain, and his triumphs were also mine. People always thought we were brothers, and they were right. We were brothers from different mothers. There were several things that bonded us, amongst which were our love for football and our mutual passion to rise above poverty. I remember the day after our university graduation. His eyes beamed with joy as he got a brilliant idea for a startup. He was a creative genius, and he had proven it once again. In no distant time, things began to fall in place. We were finally living the dream. The boys from Mushin who rose above poverty. One day Toby came to me and said, "Let's buy a big house where we can live together and stop paying rent, and we can make more money. We can get another house and own individual houses." Of course I agreed to every genius idea he came up with, and 2 months later, we bought a house in Lekki. Tina. Oh, sweet and kind Tina. Tina was Toby's girlfriend of 3 years. She would occasionally come visiting at our new home, and the lovebirds would often tease me for being single. She would call my name and say,
"Cheta, let me hook you up with one of my beautiful friends now. It is not good for a man to be alone." No.
One fateful day, when Toby and I were downtown clubbing, I saw a young woman from across the room, her beautiful eyes calling out to me, and I could already hear her beautiful lips whispering sweet songs of Solomon's in my ear. As I walked up to her, I knew I wanted her to be mine, and I mean to be legally mine. As a man who knew what he wanted, I wasted no time, and 2 months after meeting Rose, I had finally proven to her that I was the man of her dreams, and after the 3rd month of dating, I had proposed to Rose and was eager to meet her family. Rose was an orphan and an only child, so I met with her uncles and a few of her aunties from her mother's side. So Toby and I decided to be that immediate family she never had. We loved her and wanted to protect her, and then came my wedding, the happiest day of my life.
Will you take Rose Abuchi to be your wedded wife, to live together in holy matrimony? Will you love her, honor and keep her, in sickness and in health, and forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live?
Yes, I do. I do. I had never wanted anyone this much in my life. Rose was sophisticated, beautiful, and mysterious. She was someone who I really couldn't predict, and I couldn't get enough of her. Me being a boy from Mushin, marrying a proper lady like Rose was a dream come true. Rose moved into the house that Toby and I shared. It was a big house, so there was more than enough room for everyone. Soon I noticed the friction between Tina and Toby. Tina was unhappy with their relationship progress, but I wouldn't blame her. I mean, it's been 3 years and Toby still wasn't asking the big question, will you marry me? As soon as time went on, our startup excelled beyond our imagination. Several contracts we were bidding for started rolling in. Toby and I were attending meetings here and there, sometimes together and other times individually. We trusted each other, and I in turn also trusted my wife Rose, who knew everything about our business. It was the 3rd of March 2023, and I had gone out for a meeting from the office. I was driving back home when I saw the lights. I tried to hit the brakes, but the car refused to come to a halt. I saw my life flash before my eyes, and as soon as I closed my eyes, I held on to the memory of my beloved wife. By the time my eyes opened again, I saw Toby crying in the hospital as the doctor spoke to him. But why was he crying, I wondered. I had never seen Toby cry this much since he lost his mother 5 years ago. Little did I know I had transcended to the great beyond, until it was my lifeless body lying on the bed covered in blood. Everyone was shattered by the news, most especially my aged parents, Toby and my wife, who had suddenly become a widow. Months later, Toby began spending more and more time with Rose in a bid to comfort her, and would often return home with similar gifts for both his girlfriend and my widow. Over time, Tina began to feel uneasy with the recent development, but she didn't want to come across as insensitive. And I also was very uncomfortable. But tell me, what can a dead man do? One evening at the office, Toby got an email concerning the business deal we were chasing. It had pulled through, and our company was being awarded a contract. It was the biggest contract we have ever been awarded. So I didn't blame Toby when he was full of excitement and decided to celebrate. He bought gifts for Tina and my wife and also bought some bottles of champagne.
On getting home, his girlfriend Tina was yet to be back, so he went to share a bottle with Rose. "What are you celebrating?" she asked with a keen interest. Toby gave her no concrete reason. Rather, he gave her a silly excuse that he just needed a glass to lift his spirit after a long day at the office. They were speaking at length about my memory when Toby gently held her face, leaned in and planted a kiss on her lips. And so began a relationship between my best friend and my widow. Often at times, Toby began to sneak into her room at night or spend a great amount of time calling her on the phone while at the office. He even goes as far as taking her out in public on dates and public functions. Watching my best friend fall for my widow was a different kind of pain. But this time, I saw clearly what made men fall for Rose. She was good at capturing a man's attention, holding so intensely that she became his focal point. At the back of all of this was Tina, who had become highly suspicious of her man. Her affection for Rose had gradually turned into hatred. Oh, how she hated Rose. She began to pay attention to Rose's activity, and she realized Rose was always leaving the house. Where could a woman who just lost her husband barely 3 months ago go to? Rose didn't have a job, and she was yet to start up any business before my sudden demise. By this time, both ladies were living under false pretense of being cordial. The house had suddenly become cold, and each time Tina raised the issue about Rose to Toby, he would pick up a fight with her and repeatedly tell her to leave the relationship if he no longer served her. Their love was wax cold, and they both knew it. Before Tina packed up and left, she shared her doubts about Rose to Toby, about how she feels my wife was hiding something because she was always leaving the house and coming back just before he arrived. But Toby took it as a sign of jealousy, and of course Tina was jealous, and she had every reason to be. The day Tina packed her things and left, I saw the pain in her eyes, how 3 years of her life had just gone down the drain. I wish I could hug her and tell her everything would be okay, but what can I do but watch helplessly? As days went on, Rose had insisted on taking over my place in the company, and she had every right to. She was my next of kin. She started to ask a lot of questions about the company, and my best friend would fill her with every information she needed. He was going to officially hand over the shares of my company to my widow because that was the clause she had mentioned before she agreed to be his wife. I finally saw Rose for who she was, a master manipulator. And even now my best friend had fallen deep into her whims of deceit. They were getting married. Toby had proposed to her in Paris during their recent vacation. The news had spread like wildfire to my family. They were enraged, but Toby had his mind made up. Although he never failed in his duty of looking after my aged parents, when it came to the issue of my widow, he turned a deaf ear and insisted it was better he married my widow than her getting married into a different family, and so a wedding day was fixed. Everything was moving so fast. The wedding preparation and the handing over of my company's shares to Rose. He had started giving her documents and legal paperwork to read and sign. Everything was going well for Rose until she started getting calls from her past. Toby noticed the tension in her anytime her phone rang, but she dismissed her worries and said they were calls from the wedding planner or her family members from the village. One fateful day, Toby had mixed up some business documents with the one he had given to Rose to sign. He went to her room and started to look for the documents, but there was no document or file in sight. Toby's ability to be persistent is an attribute I admire a lot about him. So he kept on searching, and this time he went into her personal luggage. The thought of finding something naughty thrilled him, so he searched even deeper. As he looked, he found an old file and brought it out. In it was a few baby pictures, some hospital test results, and 2 international passports. He opened both, and there were passports of her, but as he closed it, he noticed the disparities in the names as both had distinct names and information.
Toby was puzzled. He couldn't make sense of what he just saw. Who was Rose? We both shared the same thoughts as he wondered who this mysterious woman was. As I watched him drive aimlessly before settling into the hotel that night, I finally found some sense of peace, knowing the truth might come to light before it was too late. He left a message for Rose that he was working late and would be home till the next day, and then he sent Tina, his ex-girlfriend, a message telling her it was a matter of urgency that they met, and she agreed. When Tina finally arrived, Toby begged her to tell him everything she noticed about Rose. As she spoke, he realized Rose had been going to places and leaving the house. Most of the time, she had made him believe she was at home. So where the hell has she been going to? He also learned about her secret calls and strange behaviors. He thanked Tina deeply and asked for her forgiveness. He promised to make things right as he drove her back home. Toby returned home to an angry fiancée.
Where the hell have you been? What kind of a man disappears on his wife-to-be?
Toby apologized and promised to make it up to her. He wiped her tears and promised to take her out for lunch the next day, and that seemed to make her happy. I stared at Toby in utter confusion. Why was he still being nice to her? Why? Can a dead man do? It's a week later, and also the day I witnessed my best friend and best man wed my widowed wife. Everything seemed to be perfect. The house was busy with activities. The intending couple had chosen an exclusive beach for their wedding. Knowing Rose, I didn't expect anything less from her. I watched her put on the most elegant wedding dress, her face perfectly made up and her hair held up in a ponytail. Toby looked distressed, like he couldn't wait for the day to be over. Something was wrong and I could feel it in my ghostly bones. As Tina walked downstairs into the living room, she walked right into some men in uniform holding out handcuffs and saying the words most criminals hope not to hear.
You are under arrest for the murder of Cheta Okoro. Anything you say or do will be used against you in the court of law.
If it was possible to have a second death, I would have died of a heart attack that instant. I knew Rose was cunning and deceitful, but I never imagined she was the reason for my death. I stared at Toby and his eyes were cold and piercing. Rose started to cry and wail, saying it was all a misunderstanding and she had a wedding to attend. She called on Toby, but he turned away from her and gave the police the go-ahead to take her away. In case you're wondering how all of this happened, Toby had sent a technician to bug her room the day he took her out for lunch, and that was when he heard all her calls and was able to send a private investigator to track her activities. Rose wasn't just a criminal with several false identities. She was also a part of a syndicate who targeted rich and powerful men in a bid to extort and defraud them. Rose was being blackmailed by her boss, who threatened to expose her for wanting to part ways. She had decided my shares of the company were good enough to keep her going for the rest of her life. As the police van drove off, I finally found a sense of peace. The truth had been revealed. I walked over to Toby, who had his head in his palms, sobbing. He looked up and smiled with tears in his eyes. For a moment, I believe he saw me. As I smiled back at him, I began to fade away from the world. My business here is done, and my soul at peace.